The first thing I did after my rebirth was to replace the boiled water in the pesticide bottle with dichlorvis. In my previous life, my family had just become the first household with an annual income of $10 in the village when my husband went into business. Failed, and owed a debt of $130. My husband felt guilty and said he didn't want to drag me and my mother-in-law down. So he drank pesticide to commit suicide. To avoid being chased by debt collectors, my mother-in-law hid the family's remaining money in the coffin. The debt collectors couldn't get the money and occupied our house. In order to protect my mother-in-law, I had my leg broken again. But I didn't expect that at the funeral, my husband's coffin would catch fire and all the money would be burned. I supported this family alone, working day and night to pay off the debt, and also took care of my mother-in-law until her death. However, I ended up with injuries and white hair, just when I could only rely on collecting rags on the roadside to make a living. I ran into my husband, who had died many years ago, hugging a woman and a child while walking on the road. They looked glamorous and beautiful. Husband, you are still smart. You faked your death to get rid of the debt and used the money to remarry. My husband said indifferently, it's all because of that woman's stupidity. Since she took your position, she should have contributed money and effort. I couldn't believe it. He died suddenly from anger on the spot. When he opened his eyes again, he returned to the day when he drank pesticide to fake his death. Callista, I'm sorry. Not only did I lose all the family money, but I also owed $130. I deserve to die. I can't let you get involved. Just use a bottle of pesticide and the debt will be settled. My husband Brian knelt in front of me and cried bitterly. He even prepared a coffin to die to prove his will. He cried and regretted so much that he picked up the pesticide bottle and was about to pour it into his mouth. In my previous life, I was scared and didn't have time to stop him. This time, I rushed over quickly, grabbed his wrist tightly, and tilted the bottle outwards. The whole bottle of pesticide was spilled on his clothes and the ground. And Brian didn't drink a single drop. Ignoring Brian's ugly face, I threw away the bottle and grabbed his hand. Husband, money is not as important as life. Don't be depressed, no matter how difficult it is. There must be a way out. I will give all my dowry to you to pay off your debts. Let's find a way together. I looked at him worriedly, as if I was thinking about him completely. When he heard about the dowry, his eyes instantly burst with desire. He asked anxiously, "Really, are you willing to give me your dowry?" I sneered in my heart. You are acting so hard. Isn't it just for my dowry? Of course, we are husband and wife. Who else can I help if I don't help you? After a lot of persuasion, Brian pretended to give up the idea of committing suicide and happily went to get my dowry. Seeing the excitement in his eyes, my heart chilled. In my previous life, Brian cheated me out of my dowry under the banner of paying off debts. Drank pesticide to fake his death, took away all the money in the family, and lived with another woman. However, in order to protect my mother-in-law and his empty coffin, my legs were broken by the debt collectors, and I was burdened with huge debts. In the end, I provided for my mother-in-law in her old age and paid off debts for a lifetime. I could only make a living by collecting rags on the roadside. Meanwhile, Brian remarried, and his family of 3 was happy. Fortunately, God had eyes and let me start over. Since my husband wanted to drink pesticide, how could boiled water be enough? Let's do it for real. I took out all my dowry and gave it to Brian, asking him to pay off his debts. My mother-in-law, who always disliked me, was puzzled and doubted why I was so straightforward. I wiped my tears and said, "Mom, Brian and I are husband and wife. His debt is my debt. I will help him pay it back even if we have to eat coarse food. Fortunately, you still have some money. Whether we can eat meat in the future depends on you." My mother-in-law immediately became alert and glared at me unhappily. "I knew you had bad intentions. All my money is for my coffin. Why should I spend it on you?" She turned into the house, took out her own money, and handed it to Brian. "Son, take this money too." The two of them argued with each other. Brian accepted it without a second thought and took almost all the money in the family. I knew that he wouldn't pay back the debt but would just take the money and leave, leaving the $130 debt on me. But it didn't matter. He wouldn't be able to use the money for long. The next morning, there was a sound of slamming doors outside the yard. A group of tall and strong men rushed to the door of the house. All of them had fierce faces. The leader had a scar on his cheekbone. He kicked the gate open and hit the stone with the stick in his hand, making a loud noise. "Brian, it's time to pay back the money you owe us. In my previous life, when this group of people came, he had already faked his death and run away. This time I would not let him have his way." I decisively hid behind Brian and said in a crying tone, "Who are you? What are you doing in my house? Husband, help me." I also pushed Brian out and asked him to stand in front. When Brian saw them, his face turned pale and he shuddered subconsciously. His buttocks trembled and he swallowed his saliva. "Brother Hubert, $130 is too much. I can't pay it back." Brother Hubert smiled grimly and the scar on his face moved. "You can't pay it back? You didn't say that when you borrowed the money. Don't think of defaulting." The noise attracted the neighbors nearby. Several people poked their heads out to see, but didn't dare come forward and just gathered outside to watch from a distance. Didn't Brian just become a millionaire? I didn't expect that he would owe $130 again. How many lifetimes will it take to pay it off? It's better not to do this business. Now, not only did he not make any money, but the creditors also came to the door. More and more people came to watch and talk. Brian blushed and shouted, "Money is not as important as life. If you keep pressing me like this, I'll give you my life as compensation. Okay?" Brother Hubert sneered and looked at him mockingly. "You're worth $130? He thought Brian was bluffing. But the next second, Brian took out a pesticide bottle. "The debt is cancelled when a person dies. Callista, for you and Mom, I'll use my life to make up for it. After I die, put me in the coffin you bought. Don't waste money. Bury me early." His face was full of generosity. And he didn't forget to wash his reputation. After saying that, he picked up the bottle and gulped it down. He was even afraid that I would stop him. He drank it quickly. Everyone was stunned, watching Brian foam at the mouth and twitch all over as soon as he threw the bottle. I rushed over and cried, "Husband, don't leave me. How can I live without you?" Before I could get close, my mother-in-law howled and hugged Brian, who had fallen to the ground. "My son, why did you make your old mother send off a young man? You're my only son." She was like an old hen protecting her chick. She pushed me hard and said, "Don't come over here. No one is allowed to get close to my son." I sat on the ground several meters away from them, lowered my head, covered my face, and cried helplessly. Brother Hubert frowned, looked at Brian, who kept rolling his eyes and drooling, and said in an ominous tone, "You're brave, but you can't escape your debt even in death. Brothers, we'll come again tomorrow." The debt collectors left. Brian lay in his mother's arms. He was really dying. He began to sweat all over and twitch. The neighbors who were watching were shocked. A kind-hearted person said, "Let's rush to the hospital. Immediate treatment might save his life." But my mother-in-law said, "Why go to the hospital? They're all just trying to cheat people out of money. Don't we already owe enough? You want to waste more on something like that?" She hugged Brian tightly and refused to let go, no matter what anyone said. Seeing that Brian's breathing was getting weaker and weaker, he tugged at my mother-in-law's sleeve with trembling hands. "Mom, save me." My mother-in-law thought he was talking about the money and quickly said, "Don't worry, son, we won't let you down. We'll hide the money well." Brian shook his head desperately. But to others, it just looked like a faint motion. He made a small sound with difficulty. "Help!" I burst into tears and howled. "Husband, why are you so miserable? Don't die, please." Brian was struggling to breathe. His eyes rolled back, and he almost collapsed. A neighbor aunt urged me, "Callista, hurry and take your husband to the hospital. Or at least to the clinic. If he keeps lying here, he's just waiting to die." I sobbed uncontrollably and slowly got up. My mother-in-law rushed over and held me back, saying, "Don't go. Brian is still lying here. You don't care about him. And now you want to find a doctor?" She did everything to stop me. Others couldn't help but speak up. "Brian's mother, he's not dead yet. You have to find a doctor to save him. If you won't go, why stop his wife?" Of course, she couldn't say it out loud, and she hesitated. At that moment, A voice came from the crowd. "Get out of the way. Let me take a look." Someone shouted in surprise. "Dr. John." Dr. John from the village clinic happened to pass by and ran over. When he saw Brian's face, he immediately said seriously, "The situation is critical. We must rush to a big hospital for emergency treatment." But my mother-in-law hugged him even tighter and said, "No, Dr. John," being compassionate, ignored everything and snatched Brian from her arms. His face was full of urgency as he shouted, "Any later and it'll be too late. Villagers, help. Saving a life is more important than building a 7-story pagoda." Some neighbors helped carry Brian. Others tried to persuade my mother-in-law, and some brought their tricycles. The scene was chaotic. While waiting for the vehicle, everyone worked together to lift Brian onto the tricycle. But my mother-in-law grabbed the wheel and cried, "Where are you taking my son? Give him back to me." I pleaded with red eyes. "Mom, the doctor said Brian can still be saved. He'll be cured." But she became more agitated and shrieked, "No, who knows if you're really trying to save him? I know my son. He's hopeless. There's no need to go to the hospital." Everyone was shocked by her cruel declaration. It was unbelievable. How could a mother give up on her son without even trying to save him? She shouted angrily, "What do you know? I have my reasons." No one understood her reasons. But the next moment, everyone saw the dying Brian start vomiting violently. At first it was just vomit. People instinctively pinched their noses and stepped back. A few seconds later, Brian began vomiting blood. A lot of blood poured from his mouth, as if a hole had opened in his stomach. Everyone was stunned. My mother-in-law rushed over and grabbed him again, shouting, "I told you not to send him to the hospital. Now look." Moving him made him vomit blood. The neighbor aunt pointed at her and scolded, "We were trying to save your son. The tricycle is ready. You're the only one stopping us. What's wrong with saving someone?" I tried to persuade her. "Mom, if you keep stopping us, Brian will really be beyond saving." My mother-in-law turned around and slapped me. As soon as your husband is dying, you side with outsiders against me." I covered my face and cried. But Brian was still vomiting blood, so much that it pooled beneath him. My mother-in-law turned around, saw it, and started to panic. She picked him up and cried, "Brian, let's not go to the hospital. Don't vomit blood. You'll be fine." Others looked at her like she was mad, but I knew she thought Brian was faking it. Dr. John seized the chance to run over, check Brian's condition, and feel his pulse. When Brian didn't move, he withdrew his hand with a solemn expression. "It's too late. He drank too much pesticide. His stomach is poisoned." "I'm sorry." My mother-in-law instinctively snapped. "How is that possible, you quack?" She glared at him, not noticing Brian's pale face and purple lips. I said quietly, "Mom, you may not know how to treat illnesses, but surely you can tell if someone is still breathing." Hearing that, she glanced at Brian's lifeless face and hesitantly reached her hand under his nose. 2 seconds later, her face went pale, and she suddenly collapsed. My mother-in-law looked at Brian in disbelief, her face full of fear and shock. She grabbed his shoulders and shook him. Brian, wake up." But Brian was really dead. His head drooped, limp, without any response. The mother-in-law shook Brian frantically, pinching his philtrum and lifting his eyelids, as if her delayed grief had finally surfaced. Her movements grew increasingly frantic. Suddenly, she rushed to Dr. John, tearing at his clothes and crying, "Dr. John, look at my son. Look at him quickly. What happened to him?" Dr. John frowned and said, "What's the point of not sending him to the hospital earlier? He's dead now. What's the use? Look at his pupils. They're constricted. That's a symptom of pesticide poisoning." The mother-in-law stood up abruptly, her face flushed. "Impossible. How could my son be poisoned by pesticides?" The neighbors gave her strange looks. Everyone saw Brian drink a bottle of pesticide. What else could have poisoned him if not that? Her face turned pale. Only then did she remember the bottle tossed into the corner at the beginning. She ran to pick it up. A careful sniff confirmed it was real pesticide, not boiled water. It was then that she realized the biggest flaw in the plan. Brian had wanted to fake his death but mistakenly drank real pesticide. The earlier symptoms weren't an act, and the blood he vomited was real. He was truly poisoned, and the best window for saving him had been missed. The mother-in-law was full of regret. She had genuinely believed Brian hadn't drunk the poison and had done everything to stop him from being taken to the hospital. Unexpectedly, he had died. Looking at the dirty corpse on the ground, I felt an odd sense of satisfaction. At that moment, the mother-in-law rushed over and slapped me hard, pointing and screaming, "Was it you who gave Brian the pesticide? How could you be so cruel? Brian was your husband, and you poisoned him." Her bloodshot eyes glared at me with hatred. The slap made my head spin. My face stung and swelled. I said aggrievedly, "Mom, what are you saying?" In front of everyone. It was clearly Brian who drank the pesticide himself. He even said that once he died, his debts would be erased. Wasn't he determined to die? I couldn't stop him. I had been the one who tried to save him and send him to the hospital. But you stopped me, calling me a traitor. Tears streamed down uncontrollably, and I cried until I was breathless. I listed everything that had happened, one by one. My mother-in-law, however, suddenly turned into an unreasonable madwoman. The neighbors, who had come to help out of goodwill, were scorned by her. She had already been unpleasant, but now she was even more caustic. "Brian's mother, you've gone senile. One moment you say your son is beyond saving, and the next you want to rescue him. Now that he's really dead, you're blaming your daughter-in-law. You must be insane. I think you're targeting Callista and deliberately accusing her, trying to shift the blame for your son's death. Bah, your son deserved it. It's all your fault." The crowd chimed in, scolding my mother-in-law. I still bore the red slap marks from when I tried to save Brian. I was just a pitiful woman whose husband had died. My mother-in-law's eyes rolled back in fury, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "What do you know? My son was alive and well." Everyone believed she had gone mad from grief. Dr. John sighed, though there was no treatment necessary. He advised cremation soon, otherwise, the body would decompose in the summer heat. Upon hearing this, the mother-in-law hesitated and didn't give a clear response for a long while. Then another voice came from the crowd. "He can't be cremated. Brother Brian said he wanted to be buried." The voice belonged to a pretty girl who stepped forward with a hint of anger in her expression. The moment I saw her clearly, I clenched my fists tightly. It was Bonnie, the woman Brian had planned to elope with. In the previous life, after faking his death, Brian married her and had children. They were very happy. Didn't you hear? Brother Brian wanted to be buried. He even bought his own coffin. The dead deserve respect. How can you ignore his final wish? Bonnie raised her head solemnly, righteously defending Brian's decision. She walked over to the mother-in-law and said with concern, "Auntie, don't worry. Brother Brian will not be cremated. I'll help carry him into the coffin." I could tell Bonnie wasn't sure whether Brian was really dead. She had likely come only because she feared we'd insist on cremation. But for some reason, Grandma's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Denial was useless. Someone asked curiously, "Who are you? And what's your relationship with Brian?" Bonnie blushed slightly and subconsciously touched her belly. "I'm a friend of Brother Brian. I came to see him today. But I didn't expect to witness this scene. He's gone, and he even prepared a coffin for himself. Can't we at least fulfill his last wish?" The crowd hesitated. Whether cremation or burial made little difference to them. They were just accustomed to following the doctor's advice. Grandma grabbed Bonnie's hand warmly. "Bonnie, I'm so glad you came. We have no one to help. You must stay and help us." She eagerly pulled Bonnie into the house and waved at the neighbors. "Let's go. She's a distant relative, a friend of Brian, and she's here to help." She placed Brian in the coffin and turned around to close the gate. Seeing there was nothing more to watch, the neighbors slowly dispersed. Dr. John, however, continued to protest about the cremation and went into the house. Bonnie's eyes landed on me with veiled provocation. "You must be my sister-in-law. Why are you dressed so poorly? Brother Brian is a big businessman. But he didn't even buy you decent clothes?" She covered her mouth and giggled, playing with her brand new outfit. I didn't even have to ask. I knew Brian had bought it for her. My mother-in-law beamed at Bonnie like a flower in bloom. But when she looked at me, her eyes were full of contempt. "Why aren't you serving Bonnie some water?" she snapped. I obediently walked out of the room. But after a moment, I quietly returned. The mother-in-law was coaxing Bonnie enthusiastically. "You're pregnant with Brian's first grandson. You should rest more and not tire yourself." Bonnie snorted arrogantly. "Mom, I came here for brother Brian. If he hadn't almost been cremated today, I wouldn't have shown up. I want to be with him to stop the debt collectors from coming again." As she spoke, she tried to get up and approach the coffin. But the mother-in-law quickly stopped her. "Actually, Brian told me earlier that he'd leave as soon as it got dark. I have something to take care of. So stay here for a few days. Coffins are unlucky anyway. It's empty, so don't go looking inside." Bonnie looked at the sky outside and curled her lips. "Okay. I'll wait for brother Brian to come to me." But looking at that old woman's face was really disgusting. The mother-in-law smiled at her. "Callista is just a hen that doesn't lay eggs. How can she be as powerful as you? As long as you give birth to the child, she will only be your slave." I stood outside and couldn't help but clench my palms. No wonder the mother-in-law concealed the news that Brian was really dead. She was afraid that the grandson she had in her hands would run away. I didn't expose her and obeyed her in everything. Even when the mother-in-law asked me to give up the room, I agreed. The next day, the mother-in-law held a funeral for Brian. The mourning hall had just been built when the debt collectors came again. Jonathan swept the yard grimly and laughed. "Oh, you're holding a funeral? Since you have money to buy a coffin, you should pay off the debt." The mother-in-law glared at them angrily. "My son is dead. What are you doing here? Are we not allowed to live?" Jonathan sat down at the table with his stick, looking like a master. "Brian is gone. But his wife and mother are still here, aren't they? It doesn't matter who pays the debt." A group of people looked ferocious and attacked us. My mother-in-law also changed her face. She didn't expect that even after Brian's death, the debt could not be wiped out. We couldn't pay it back even if we worked for the rest of our lives. Someone raised a stick and smashed a bench. My mother-in-law shuddered. "Callista, take out the money quickly. Take it all out." I hid behind her and cried, "Mom, where can I get the money? I even gave my dowry to my husband. I don't have a penny on me." Jonathan seemed to be waiting for that. He said immediately, "It's easy if you don't have money. Your house isn't worth much. Give us the land, any valuable things. Take them to pay off the debt." With an order, they began to search everywhere, taking everything in the house, even the pots and pans. I pretended to be scared and hid in the corner. Without stopping them at all, my mother-in-law saw it and looked pained. Someone took the newly painted bench. She rushed over and held it tightly. If someone took an old iron pot, she would also reach out to stop them. "This is my family's stuff. You can't take it away. You are bandits and robbers. You might as well kill me." But how could this group of people care about the elderly? They just walked out. The mother-in-law blocked their way and was beaten a few times. Even the decorations of the mourning hall were taken down, and the wreaths and various decorations were smashed to the ground. In a few minutes, the whole house was in chaos. Like bandits had passed through. The mother-in-law sat in the mourning hall and sobbed, slapping her thighs and cursing the sky. Amid the chaos, someone knocked over the candles and ignited the cloth hanging nearby. The fire spread to the coffin and got out of control instantly. The whole coffin was like a huge oil drum and became the center of the fire. The mother-in-law was the first to react and shouted, "My son!" Jonathan and his group had just left, and the door was still open. The neighbors outside saw the fire and came in to help put it out. I was also among them. But I knew that this coffin wouldn't stop burning until it was gone. To successfully fake his death, Brian had specially made this coffin using flammable wood. It was also covered with tung oil inside and out. In my previous life, I tried my best to put out the fire but ended up with just a pile of ashes. This time, I watched coldly as the coffin burned beyond recognition, revealing the charred corpse inside. In the smoky mourning hall, my mother-in-law sat in front of the coffin with a dusty face, looking miserable. "My son, my money." Some people wondered, what money was stolen? I knew. It was the money my mother-in-law and I had given Brian to pay off his debts. It was all hidden in the coffin. Brian had planned to take the money after faking his death, but he never thought the fake death would turn into a real one. As for the money, I had already taken it out. At this time, Bonnie, who was hiding in the inner room, also heard the noise and ran out. When she saw the charred corpse, she screamed and almost fainted. "Brother Brian." Bonnie trembled, turned around and vomited violently, then rushed to her mother-in-law, grabbed her collar, and asked, "Why did Brother Brian die? Didn't you say he wasn't dead? Old woman, you lied to me." When the mother-in-law saw she had been discovered, she said hypocritically, "I did it for your own good. Bonnie, your body can't take it." Bonnie didn't pretend anymore. She pushed my mother-in-law hard and cursed, "You're still making excuses. I'd rather die than stay here. What are you going to do? You must give me the baby in one piece." When she saw Bonnie was about to leave, my mother-in-law immediately jumped up to pull her back. Bonnie wasn't a pushover either. She looked down at my mother-in-law sarcastically and said, "You're dreaming. I'd rather throw the child away than give it to you." My mother-in-law immediately became anxious and hugged Bonnie with both hands. Dragging her home, Bonnie lay on the ground and started to cry, "Help me. You're robbing a woman in broad daylight. What era is this? Is there still no law? I'm going to die." Others were stunned for a long time and then tried to stop them. Brian's mother, "What are you doing? Why don't you let her go?" My mother-in-law retorted without hesitation, "She is pregnant with my grandson. This is our family affair. Why are you, an outsider, interfering?" Someone gasped, "Your grandson? That must be Brian's son." For a moment, all eyes were on Bonnie and me. I looked at Bonnie in shock. "You are pregnant with Brian's child? What is your relationship with him?" Bonnie's face turned ugly. She wanted to leave but didn't expect the child would also be exposed. "No, I have nothing to do with Brian. Stop slandering me. Let me go." She was so anxious that she pushed her mother-in-law hard and denied any relationship with Brian. The mother-in-law shouted, "You are pregnant with my Brian family's grandson. You are part of my Brian family. You must give birth to the child. Otherwise, you're committing murder. My son bought you a house and a car. Everything you eat, wear, and use is his money. Even this gold chain of yours was bought by my son." She reached out to pull the gold necklace hidden around Bonnie's neck. When she pulled it out, it was shining with gold. Some people were surprised. Didn't Brian fail in business? How could he still be so rich? The mother-in-law snorted coldly. "How could my son fail? He borrowed $130, and $70 to $80 was used to buy things for Bonnie. It's a pity that he was so devoted to this woman. But in the end, he couldn't even keep his bloodline after his death." Bonnie's face flushed as she covered the gold necklace and argued, "He gave all this to me voluntarily. I don't even have a title to follow him. So can't I accept some benefits?" Her mother-in-law jumped up and shouted, "You admitted it. You turned against me after taking the benefits. You're truly shameless. You must stay today. Our Brian family cannot lose our grandson." Bonnie slapped her mother-in-law and retorted, "Your family is so poor now. Who would want to stay here?" The two of them started wrestling again, and the yard descended into chaos. After all, it was a family matter. So the onlookers just stood around watching and didn't intervene. Soon, Bonnie collapsed on the ground, clutching her stomach and crying out in pain. "My stomach hurts so much. I'm going to miscarry." Her mother-in-law panicked, worried that she might lose her only grandson, and hurriedly called for someone to take Bonnie to the health center. Fortunately, the doctor said it was only a threatened miscarriage and not serious. No one could tell what Bonnie was really thinking. If she had truly miscarried, she wouldn't have mentioned abortion so calmly. The scene fell into silence, and for a moment, everyone thought again about her relationship with Brian. But her mother-in-law didn't seem to care. She naturally ordered me, "Go get a kettle of hot water. Can't you see Bonnie is exhausted? Nothing can happen to my grandson." It was as if she hadn't just been arguing with Bonnie minutes ago. My eyes welled up with tears as I asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, tell me the truth. Is Brian really having an affair with Bonnie behind my back?" My mother-in-law, used to ordering me around, snapped, "Do you still have any complaints? You useless thing? Now that my son is dead and you haven't given birth to a child. Bonnie's baby is my only grandson. If you don't take good care of her, how should I deal with you? I covered my face and sobbed. I've worked so hard to keep this family together. I didn't even buy myself new clothes, saving every grain of rice and every bowl of vegetables. But Brian spent that money to support another woman. What am I then? A guilty look flickered across her eyes. But she said self-righteously, "My son is dead. What's the point of bringing all this up now? Your job is to raise my grandson well." I wiped my tears and sneered. "Yes, Brian is dead. Then why should I listen to you and raise the child he had with another woman? From today on, we'll go our separate ways. You and Bonnie can be mother-in-law and daughter-in-law." I returned to my parents' home. My mother-in-law objected immediately. "You're Brian's legally married wife. Of course, you have to be a widow for him. Don't think about dumping all the debts on us." I replied angrily. "Brian didn't spend a single penny of the debts he owed me. Why should I pay them? Bonnie took all that money. She should be the one to repay it." I turned to the crowd and asked, "Everyone, please judge. After all these years of suffering for their son, even giving him my dowry, I was still betrayed. Can't I separate from the family now that my husband is gone?" The neighbors chimed in. "Many daughters-in-law remarry. It's only natural for her to return to her parents' home. Raising someone else's child. Who would want that burden?" Another added, "We've all seen Callista's hard work. She's done nothing but good for this family. Now that Brian left a child behind, it's better to let her go and live her life. Forcing her to stay would just be cruel." I smiled faintly and said, "Everyone here, be my witness. My husband Brian is dead. They betrayed me first. Today, I cut ties with my ex-mother-in-law. From now on, her family has nothing to do with me." My mother-in-law pointed at me in fury and shouted, "You heartless brat. Let's see how you survive on your own." I said nothing more. I turned around, went home, packed my things, and left. As I walked out, I saw Jonathan and his people approaching in a menacing group. I knew the Brian family would fall sooner or later. I took back my dowry and the money Brian had hidden after faking his death. I had stashed it under a rock outside. When I retrieved and counted it, there was nearly $10,000, enough to start a new life. I took the money and rushed to the station, leaving behind that place of chaos and betrayal. Later, my business flourished. I never had to worry about food or debt again. The next time I heard about my mother-in-law was through a fellow villager I met by chance. After I left, the debts fell on her and Bonnie. Bonnie tried to have an abortion and leave, but the fetus was already too far along, and she bled heavily. She died that very day. My mother-in-law couldn't pay off the debt alone and was beaten. She had to hand over Bonnie's money. Most of the debt was repaid, but there were still $50 to $60 left. She couldn't repay it, ended up alone, and was constantly harassed. In the end, her house was confiscated. She wandered the streets and survived by collecting garbage. Not long after, she got sick and died alone. The villagers said I was lucky to have left early, otherwise I'd have been dragged down with them. I smiled and said nothing. There's no such thing as luck. It was just a desperate decision after enduring enough pain. Their story had ended, but my life was still just beginning. If you had given birth to a son, Brian, would you have still needed to look for someone else?